Hi, I'm Sean Martin, President and founder of Donek Snowboards. I'm going to show you how to mount our 4x4 and UPM plate systems today. So here's the plate, and we'll start with the 4x4 system. Either system is going to come with 8 long screws and 8 short screws. An Allen wrench. You won't get the T-handle, you'll get just a L-shaped Allen wrench. And you will also get a spacing guide with your 4x4 system. So let's move these screws out of the way here, and we'll show you how to get started. Now if you look at this spacing guide, basically these two narrowest tabs that you see me lifting here are going to produce a 53 centimeter axle spacing. If you move out to one of the next ones, you'll get up to a 57. Then the middle ones will provide a 60 centimeter, then a 63, and then a 66. Your axle spacing should be between 6 and 10 centimeters longer than your center-to-center stance width. So if you're riding a 50 centimeter stance width on your board, which on our boards is right here, these center sets of inserts provide a 50 centimeter, or that's about 19.5 inches. Then you want to go to about 60 centimeters, maybe one in from there, to 57. The goal is to get the axle so that it's just about under the ball of your front foot and just under the heel of your back foot. Now the front one's more important than the back, so you know, you might want to fudge things a little bit in order to ensure that you get the axle under your front foot in a more appropriate location than under your back foot. The back doesn't matter nearly as much. The first thing you want to do is locate the center of your stance if you were to ride the board without a plate. Now most of us manufacturers try and make this pretty simple on you. I've seen a lot of customers overcomplicate this stuff by trying to measure points on the board and then determine stuff. But basically we center this hole pattern over the sweet spot in the board. So if you look, the two closest inserts right here, I'll turn the tape around for those of you watching on the video, is about 15.5 inches if we're looking in inches. So the center of our stance should be right in between those at 7.5 inches. So put a little mark there, and that tells me this is where I'm going to center my stance when I put my bindings on the board. Next thing I want to do is decide what my axle spacing should be, and I am going to pick the 60 centimeter just for ease of use. Now when you use this little spacing guide, you've probably had it rolled up, which makes the tabs want to fold down or come up or down in one direction. You really don't want to put them down because they'll get locked down in there and make it very difficult for you to remove. So make it so that they want to lift up as they're doing right here. I'm going to slide them underneath the axles on the plate, on front and back. And what we're going to do is, if you look at that plate, there's a large hole and there's a large hole here and a small hole here. You want that little tab to descend into this large hole in the back. So you just slide it under there, drop the tabs into those holes, and slide your the plates out as far as you can. Now what you got to do is set this on top of the board and locate roughly where you think you're going to place your plate hardware now. So I'm going to choose a set of holes, and I'm probably going to just sort of eyeball where I might want it right now, and then reset it up again in a minute. So I'm going to pull this out. I've noted roughly where they are on my hole pattern, and I'll pull this thing back out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 4 of my short screws and my Allen wrench, and I'm just going to get those started in there. And the way I tend to do this is I looked a little closer at my back set of holes and eyeballed pretty close to where I was going to land in my slots. And for me, I was going to land pretty much all the way forward. If you're in the middle of these slots, you want to make sure that this plate, because there is a little bit of room for movement here, you want to make sure that it's not cockeyed off at one side or the other. So you can either sort of push it up sideways, or if in my case I'm all the way forward on it, I'm just going to push it all the way forward. That ensures that the axle is sitting there square. And then I'm going to tighten down my screws. And then I took a mental note roughly of where my axle or where my holes were on my front plate. And I'm going to loosely start my screws here. I want to leave it so that I can still slide the plate forward and back so it still moves. Now I'm going to set my exact axle spacing here. So I'm going to grab my spacing guide again, slide it under the axle in the front, slide it under the axle in the back, drop the appropriate tabs into that large hole, and then slide that front plate out. Now, you don't want to slide it out so far that it's bending up the ends like this, because that means I'm actually much further than I need to be. And the other thing is we've provided for a lot more motion in this slider, so you can be off a little bit on your positioning. So I'm just going to sort of push down on these a few times until the spacing guide comes free. Then I'm going to slide it out, and I'm going to let that front plate just rest where I want it to be and cinch everything down. And once again, I'm sort of making an eyeball check to make sure that this plate is relatively square to the board. With the front, it doesn't matter quite as much, but it is important that you get everything, you know, fairly square here. So I'm going to tighten all my screws down. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my plate and set it on top of the hardware here. Now, this front slider, when they're new, can be kind of tight. So it's probably easiest if you mount the front first, and then you can slide the plate back, because you get a little bit more leverage on it, and slide it back into position. So I'm going to take some of my long screws here, and I'm going to try and drop them into my holes. Now, you want to be careful as far as your positioning on this plate, because at this point you want to be thinking about where's the center of my hole pattern or the center of my stance going to land on the plate with respect to the mark I made underneath the plate on the board. So I've slid the plate back a little bit, and probably doesn't look like I've quite gone far enough. I'm going to get these screws in the back here started. I've got my Allen wrench down here measuring, marking that spot I had, and I'll double check on my hole pattern, and I can see I'm about 3/4 of an inch off. So the plate is a little bit behind center, so I'd want to bump my my stance up so that it's actually centered over that that axle. So let's say I've got a 20-inch stance. I just put the 10-inch mark right there where my center is, and I center my bindings at that 0 and 20, or whatever your stance width is. Maybe you're at 18, so you can move things around. Just keep that in mind when you're setting stuff up. So next thing we'll do is I'll show you how to set up a UPM system. Okay, so I've got all the 4x4 hardware removed from this board, and I'm ready to start on the UPM. Getting the screws into this pivoting or the back axle holder is, well, it just simply requires that you rotate the pivot. So if you back it off like that, you can drop your screw in there, and drop your short screw in there too. Go the other way on the other side, and you can get a screw in here and a screw in here, and just get them back centered, and then they drop right into the holes. The front slider is a little simpler. You got a lot more room, and that's because that front slider, in order to accommodate the slider, we had to skip a set of holes. So I'm just going to drop those screws in there, and then I can drop it on the hole pattern. Now, what's going on with this hole pattern is the shortest you now get, I believe, is 57 centimeters on the axle spacing on the UPM. Then you can move out to 60, 63, and then 66 if you do that. So I'm going to go with 60 centimeters again and drop everything in place. Now, when you put this front slider in position, you want the curved section that's there, you want it facing forward. If you face it the other way, you don't get enough throw in the forward direction. So make sure you put the curves towards the front of the board. And then you don't need any fancy spacing guides or anything like that. You just drop it on the hole pattern and go. So here we go. And then accessing the rear axle holder here, you just drop your Allen wrench through the hole on the boss in order to access the top of that screw. And then set your plate on top. And once again, the easiest way to do this is to mount the front first, then you can slide the plate around until it matches up with the back side. So, and there we go. And so if we go and check our center of our stance on the board below and on the plate above, they actually coincide this time, which is kind of nice. That's the nice thing about the UPM system, is that you can easily reposition everything back centered to where it belongs. And our plate appears to be doing its job very nicely. Nice slide in the front and fixed in the back. So there we go. We're all set and ready to mount our bindings to the plate.